Speaking of documentary, I come from a background of video TV news, and doing news packages. I always found it was very hard to tell an entire story in 2 minutes or a couple minutes. And I imagine you run into a similar feel with creating a short documentary. I mean, what stood out to you about these documentaries, and how do you think what do you think is the difference, in terms of editing and approaching a documentary short versus the documentary feature?
Well, I think a documentary short is somewhere between a commercial for something that really happened and a feature length documentary. Okay. So you're obviously the best situation would be you leave viewers wanting to know more about what happened, especially if it's, something that is current or something that happened in the past, or, just wanting to do their own research, and like, wow, I'm going to Google that. What exactly happened? I think it's very interesting. And so, the nominees this year are very, some of them deal with the past, and some of them deal with how the past has affected, the present, and some of them are personal. Some of them are social, like social issues. I think that there's one standout for me that should win, and if it doesn't, then I think it says more about what's going on with the Academy voters. But just like many of the categories, there are a couple, or at least one, that you could find on Netflix. One of them is called "A Love Song for Latasha," and that seems very personal. It's a 19-minute short, directed by Sophia Nali Allison, and it's basically recounting what happened back in 1991 in I think it was Los Angeles, when this young girl, Latasha Harlins, was shot and killed by a convenience store clerk for trying to purchase some orange juice for $1.79. Yeah, so to me it is important because I think a lot of times we see news blurbs, child shot or whatever, and we move on.
Right.
And I think for this doc to be covering something that happened in 91, I think it's important that people's lives are remembered, and that this is being told from friends and relatives recounting who she was, not just what happened to her. So it is kind of like a memorial in a way. But while it was good and it was emotional and powerful, I think it was, as far as like in the five nominees, kind of like in the bottom level and that just shows how good some of these docs are. Another one that was also kind of personal, but really wasn't entirely like heavy like the others, but also very, kind of like heartwarming and hopeful, was a doc called A Concerto. A Concerto is a Conversation. And it's all about African-American composer Chris Bowers, who is a award-winning composer. He scored Green Book and a bunch of other TV docs and movies. But it opens up with him about to kind of like getting together with an orchestra to perform one of his concertos at I think it's the Walt Disney Theater Music Hall in Los Angeles. And he's recounting, and the rest of the short covers interview footage of him talking with his grandfather, who runs I think a dry cleaning business in Los Angeles. And it's him and his grandfather having a conversation about his work as a musician, how it was growing up, becoming a musician, but also talks about how his grandfather basically left Florida during the Jim Crow era, hitchhiked across the nation, wound up in Los Angeles. And if you could just imagine a black man hitchhiking during that time, very tumultuous.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But yeah, this is executive produced by Ava DuVernay, and Bowers also scored her Netflix miniseries, So When They See Us. And it's also co-directed by Canadian filmmaker Ben Proudfoot. Um, yeah, I thought it was a nice breath of nice kind of coming up for air as far as watching all these heavy nominees and heavy subject matters. It was beautiful and sweet to see these two, grandfather and grandson, having conversation just about life and being Black, and what it's like to pursue a career and pursue your dreams, and what it was like then, what it's like now. I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, that seems
Um,
like a little bit more of a hopeful
for
documentary.
sure, for sure. The other three, so one is called Colette, and I've been seeing a lot of marketing for this one, and that's a good thing. It's just a little unusual to see so much marketing for a short. Um, Maybe that's just what my Facebook feed looks like, but
I admit
it's
I haven't seen anything about it yet. Where can you
okay,
watch it?
okay. Um, that's a good question. Now, I'm glad you brought that up. Most of the all of these shorts you can watch if you look up shorts.tv.
Okay.
So if you Google, or if you just look at shorts.tv, it'll go to that site. And this happens every year during the Oscars. And you'll either go to a place where you could see all of these shorts on VOD, video on demand, or in theaters. So everybody has access to these. You may have to pay for them, but you have access to them. So this documentary is called Colette. It's following a 90-year-old French resistance, basically fighter worker during World War II. So we're catching up with her now, and she's the subject of the short because a French history student is looking into what happened to her brother, who was basically murdered in one of the concentration camps. And so this student is studying her brother, and so she is following and interviewing Colette. So the drama of it all is that the short pretty much covers how, and Colette is a very energetic woman for being in her 90s, and she's very kind of outgoing. But once most of the movie is her spending time with this student and then going back to Germany, which she hasn't been back to Germany since like 70 something years, and really trying to, in this sort of cathartic trip, trying to trace back what happened with her brother, and really just like even walking through the areas where her brother was held and eventually died. And it's a lot to take, just because you're watching this 90 something year old woman relive this stuff and imagine what it was like for her brother and really break down. It's very important, I think, to witness, and a very important story to be told. To deal with tragedy and loss like that. It's directed by Michael Giacchino's younger brother.
Oh, no kidding.
Anthony Giacchino, and he does a great job with covering it all. And I was actually, a lot of times when I'm watching these, especially the docs, these shorts, I'm wondering, like, how did the directors get access and get so close up? And really, it's just it's impressive the way he must have built a relationship and a trust with his subjects in this doc, especially. So there's another documentary that covers more, speaking of kind of ground level, this one called Do Not Split is covering a lot more ground level, almost guerrilla like filmmaking.
Well, that sounds cool.
Most of Yeah, it's very interesting. It takes place in Hong Kong, primarily in 2019, somewhat in 2020, and it's directed by it's an American-Norwegian documentary that is dealing with anti-extradition law amendment bills in Hong Kong, a movement in Hong Kong, including the siege of a Chinese university in Hong Kong, a siege of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So a couple of different universities there are under siege because of their views. Protest suppression, and controversial passing of a Hong Kong security law. So there's a lot going on here, and a lot of it is street level interviewing protesters, and it's very interesting because we've seen so much footage of protesting across the nation here over the past year, and you see all these like umbrellas gathered together. You see like the face masks, like not just face masks but gas masks, especially in this movie. So a lot of it feels very familiar, unfortunately, but it just, some of the camera work and some of the access that the director has here to the group of people. I mean, it's 35 minutes, the short, but it almost feels longer because by the end you're given so much information and you've seen so much that you're just like, whoa. I mean, this is a documentary where I do feel like it might have benefited from being a feature length, just because, man, I need to know more information about what's going on here.
It seems like there's just so much there in terms of that subject matter that it really could have benefited.
Yeah, I mean, especially for Americans, I think more information for us to understand what really is going on there and what is being done would be helpful. On that note, along those lines, I think the one that should win is really the hardest one to watch, and it's called Hunger Ward. It's kind of agonizing almost. It's an unflinching look at child starvation and malnutrition in Yemen. And mostly because of the ongoing civil war for years. But
which
directors...
the United States, I think, has aided part of it, right? I believe like the Saudi Arabian involvement in the Yemeni conflict is led by America.
Yeah. At the end of the documentary, the director, Sky Fitzgerald, has some texts that show up, and a lot of it is that, the U.S. and other countries have aided the bombing and the Saudi involvement in a mostly forgotten war. And if you can watch this and forget about the repercussions of bombing and the war, then you probably don't have a heart. But Fitzgerald follows a couple different, one doctor and one nurse in some of these, or two of the more prominent facilities that are actually, a lot of them are aided by American nonprofit kind of missionary agencies. One of them's ADRA, A-D-R-A. It's a great organization that I've worked with in the past. But they follow a doctor and a nurse who are dealing with the lives of hunger-stricken children in an area gripped by famine, an area that was having a hard time in and of itself, but the bombing doesn't help, because then that just decreases everything, jobs, access to food, water, everything. And when they do have food, if it's only something like wheat, then they develop a wheat allergy, and it's just, if that's all you're getting, it's not helpful, obviously. But this is spanning, it's probably the longest one. It's spanning about 40 minutes. Easily could have been stretched into a feature length. I mean, if I can't imagine if this is your job and you're taking care of these children all day, all week, for years, months, years, and not just that, but dealing with the wailing and the reaction of the family members, mothers, grandmothers, just screaming when they realize that their child has died because, of the situation. And a lot of times, sometimes they're literally in the doctors and nurses' face blaming them because, of the emotions are so high. I mean, you didn't do enough, and it's heartbreaking. And you can see the doctors and the nurses, spending time with these children, really trying to connect with them, but some of them are just so gone. Like not just they're physically in trauma, but emotionally they're just kind of shut off. And it's really hard to watch, but so needed. When you think about the things that you're complaining about in life and bemoaning, and then you see a short like Hunger Ward. I definitely want to know more. And obviously there's ways at the end of the movie that, that shows that you could help and stuff. But it's hard stuff to watch. And I think it's really well done because, again, that was one of the documentaries where I'm like, we are literally over the shoulder of this, doctor or this wailing family member. And I'm just wondering, like, what kind of relationship that this director,
Mhm.
negotiation or relationship, or even a working relationship, strike with, his subject matter here, because that's it's very personal space there.
Oh
And
my gosh, the
but
level of trust you have to have
yeah,
to be able
yeah,
to do that is outstanding.
yeah. It's really powerful, and I hope more people can see it. I hope it wins, just so it can. You never know what happens after with the careers after these short winners. With animation, I would say it's a little bit easier, because you can go right into feature animated films, or you can continue with those accolades. But as far as specifically with the documentary category, you hope that winning an Oscar will bring awareness to a situation, or at least more knowledge and action. So I hope that that's the case here.
Wow. Yeah, I was just thinking about that and the Hong Kong documentary. It's just so important. I mean, people on both sides of the political spectrum talk often about these issues and have very strong opinions about, the Chinese government, protests in Hong Kong, American military intervention. And I think
Hmm.
it's very much important, like you said, for people to actually see what's going on, not only in other parts of the world completely unrelated to their lives, but other parts of the world that are being directly impacted by our government. It's
Right.
very pivotal in raising awareness, and I really hope that they can do that. I think it really would help if that one won the Oscar.
Yeah, I mean, documentaries in general are important, whether they're feature length or shorts, because I think too often we're getting our information from social media scroll feeds, and whatever, TikTok. That's how we're getting a lot of our information from, and it's unfortunate. But when you actually are sitting down and a story is being told, and you realize that that story is real, and it's something that's happening somewhere in the world, uh, that's transforming, or it should be.
Yeah, it's one thing to connect to a fictional character, whenever something bad happens, when the Bambi dies or something like that. But
Hmm.
whenever you find yourself connecting to a real life person and then having that crystallizing moment and being like, "Holy crap,
Yeah.
this is real. This isn't
Yeah.
something that somebody came up with." I mean, you can do really. We talked about the live action and animated shorts, which are fictional stories in a lot of cases, but still very powerful and very real
Mhm.
life. But when you get to documentaries, it's just another level of realism. And again, like you said,
Yeah.
it can be hard to watch at times. So thank you for your service.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. It's my pleasure. Again, the shorts are usually my favorite category, just because you do find these, great nuggets, and I find myself more, I feel like more of like an insider when I'm watching during the telecast, and I'm watching. There's some of the more interesting acceptance speeches I've found is when the winners for the shorts come up, and you could tell that they are so excited a lot of times. And because you've seen that film, they're short, you're happy for them, but you also know why, because a lot of the times, especially with documentary, a lot of times that subject matters, it's hugely important, and that it needs to get out there.
Right. David Fowley of Keeping It Real, thank you so much. And of course, I'll put a link to your website in the description of this video, and you're welcome back anytime.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Sam. You have a good one.
Thanks.